So yesterday was an interview, a high level. So let me quickly share. So yesterday, what we did was covered BA roles, landing a BA job, demonstrable assets. Then we also spoke a little bit about how to switch transition careers. What we didn't do is storytelling. So I want to spend at least the first 20 minutes talking to you about requirements plan. That's the idea for today, followed by agile. See, I don't know if I can do justice to storytelling. I'll push it with the design thinking course or the set that happens. So let's get started. This is day two. So how many of you have experience with requirements management? Please be on mute.
Please be on mute.
Okay, I'll get started. If you have any questions, you can unmute and ask. So see, what happens is now I'm going to talk to you about a scenario where uh, uh, you are part of either so you're part of a team, project team. So you're a business analyst. The expectation from you is to gather requirements. So there is a project manager to whom you are reporting into, or you'll report into a business analyst manager. So you work with a project manager to build requirements, and they give you the complete flexibility to build a requirements plan. Why is this requirements plan required? So that you are able to communicate to the clients or the users that I need your time at this particular date and this particular slot, and this is the topic I would like to discuss with you. Right. So imagine you're creating. Let me quickly open something. Okay, let me ask you folks. Okay, let's say so I want to keep this interactive, so you can unmute and start contributing, based on which we will build on the go. So now you tell me, if I have to build an e-commerce site. Now let's say the customer is in the e-commerce space. They want to build something in the e-commerce side. Okay, so they want to build an e-commerce site. So what are the different modules that you'll be looking at? What are the different features, etc., that you should consider while building an e-commerce site? Folks, all of you on the call.
Basically, you need to accommodate different channels of sales. So that might be your digital sales, maybe in store.
No, we are talking only digital sales. For now, e-commerce side, just digital sales. So what are the features or functionalities you should look for in an e-commerce site? Let's say your business, and I'm the business analyst.
Search functions. Yeah, you can search for products.
Okay, you want to search. Okay.
And yeah, probably a payment method, right? Once the user can add to the cart and check out.
Yeah, okay. Cart and checkout is, I think, in between.
Okay, go ahead. I'll adjust this now.
Wish list.
Wish list.
How to handle modifications? Somebody.
Modifications as in?
Like maybe quantity is updated or a different item is swapped in the cart. So exchanges, how to handle exchanges.
So that's part of the cart feature, right?
Usually, like what I've seen, especially like cart and checkout, they will mainly concentrate on
so
handling what's inside the cart, but modifications section, sometimes you may have to
Basically,
go
you
to
want to
other
edit
routes,
the
right?
you want to edit the order. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Also, we'll have supply chain, right? We need to
hmm,
manage and warehouse management systems, right? The order management will have to interact
think
with the
about
warehouse.
okay. So you're talking about shipping.
Yeah.
Think about what
Okay.
the
Yeah. At
user
a higher
wants.
level.
Think about what the user wants.
Order order history.
recommendation,
Order.
Order history.
Hmm. Okay.
recommendation,
Let me say all that comes under order. High level. Then you're saying recommendations. Recommendations, payments, wish list, and recommendations will come. So you got to help me out here when we do that. Okay. So here I will say my account. All right. So let's just flow with this information. Now let's say this is what you understood as a business analyst. If you remember yesterday, I told you that you need to do some due diligence. Let's say you put into a project, so project manager or the leaders are asking you, hey, so you got to go collect requirements for this project. How confident do you feel at this point? You're saying, yeah, I'm very confident. I'm super. That's what I told you in my resume. And they say, good. So that's why we hired you. So now you know everything. Go capture it, right? So you actually, flamboyantly put a lot of things on LinkedIn, this thing. So now you got to execute these things, right? So there is no help coming your way. You got to go figure out things. So how do you do? So firstly, you look at internal documentation created by pre-sales. You'll also look at any sort of due diligence documents created by technical architects or solution architects. So this is your preliminary information that's available, which gives you a fair understanding of the different modules that you're going to build. Sometimes you will get some functional information, but not necessarily. So that's your first start where you kind of prepare, hey, what is available to me? What do I know about the e-commerce site? What are the modules that I'm looking at? So when you actually start discovering, like we spoke now, so we kind of figured out these are the high level features. And interestingly, you will see that in an organization, let's say you're going to interview folks from Walmart. When you do that, interestingly, all these people are from different departments. Okay, they are from different departments, and this is the functional topics that you will cover. Okay, so this is the thought process I'm trying to make you aware of. Okay, so search for products would be, let's say, category management. If some of you are not able to follow, you got to tell me, all right, so that I'll give you better examples. And there are times when I've even given idli vada dosa kind of examples also to drive home the point. So I'm open to give you like really basic, really layman type examples, but you got to ask that question. Okay, so search for products is basically handled by category management folks. So these are folks who will determine on Amazon, on the fashion site, what kind of categories must exist, what kind of products must exist, how often should they refresh, how do you onboard customers, how do you onboard vendors, how do you manage promotions, etc. So the category managers do that. Then the cart and checkout has a separate team. Okay, so they let's call them CC team. Okay, for time being. Why do you call them CC team? Because these are experts who've been dealing with a lot of cart and checkout related issues in the past. Okay, so there will be some sort of an operations team who's managing just cart and checkout. Trust me, what happens is, companies like Amazon, Target, any sort of e-commerce companies have different teams managing different sections of the, entire e-commerce site. So what you see as a unified experience is basically split into, hundreds of different teams managing your experiences. So let's talk about payments. So payments again is a separate team. So let's look at payments as a separate team. So I'm mentioning it straight away as payments department. Okay, so this is payments team. Then you're talking about my account. My account is basically talking about your loyalty points. Then it also talks about somebody mentioned wish list. Somebody also mentioned what was the other thing somebody mentioned, right? So let's just say okay, we can build on top of this. So you see, this is a customer loyalty team. Then we are talking about order management. So this is pretty big. It's huge. Order management is pretty huge, and it will be split into 50 to 100 different teams doing a lot of other stuff. Order processing is one. Order shipment, order tracking, order whatnot. A lot of things happen in order itself. Let's say we'll talk about order creation team. Okay, just for clarity's sake. Then you're talking about shipping team. So you're basically saying, let me put logistics team. Okay, this is the logistic department. Now, why am I doing all this? Is to give you clarity on who are the different stakeholders with whom you will conduct interviews. So at a broad level, you have figured out that these are the different teams that exist. And these teams could consist of anywhere between 3 to 5 members, or in worst case, sometimes you'll have 10 to 15 members as well. What happens is, you then need to know that 3 multiplied by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6. So you're dealing with close to 20 people. 20 plus other, you have your SMEs, you have your product, project sponsor, you will have some coordinators, you'll have some PMO. All these people will roughly make up to anywhere between 20 to 25 people. So you are going to deal with 25 to 30 different people during the requirement gathering session. So, it is like doing an event management program where you are trying to interact with a lot of different people, not only manage things in terms of, impressing them, building a rapport, collecting the right information, but you also have to do a lot of listening and managing of these requirements. And sometimes there's a lot of fight in terms of which requirements will be prioritized. So what I'm trying to make you aware is the complexity involved in collecting requirements. Hence, the need to create a requirement management plan. A requirement management plan gives clarity to you, gives clarity to the users, gives clarity to your internal teams on what Mr. Prashant or this Mr. BA who's come into the team is going to do. Okay, they allocate anywhere between 10 to 15% of the entire project time for requirement gathering. Okay, but in the agile world, it is slightly changed, but it's roughly about the same. See, in the waterfall method, you take about 15% of the total project effort. Now, if it's a 6 months project, 15% of the time is dedicated to requirement management. That is collecting requirements, building requirements, grooming, etc. In the agile world also, it's roughly the same. It's just that it is split. So in the waterfall method, you will see that you will go collect requirements for maybe 1 month or 6 weeks. If it's a big module, you have multiple modules. In an agile world, probably you will spend 1 week collecting high-level requirements, and then you will set up meetings as and when required for each sprint to collect the requirements. Okay, so you collect high-level requirements, then you go back, you work, and then you pick up some stories for a particular sprint, go back to the customer and discuss in complete detail. But in the waterfall method, you do that all at the beginning, complete requirements at the beginning. And then you don't necessarily go back that many times to the customer to clarify a lot of the questions, because you have done a lot of effort. You put a lot of effort in the beginning. That's waterfall for you. So that was the drawback in waterfall, where suddenly you can, impress the customer, or you can disappoint the customer at the end of, delivering the product. But in agile, since it's incremental and the customer is able to see increments in the, software, they are able to make quick changes. That's the beauty of working in the agile method. Whether you're working in agile, whether you're working in waterfall, please remember that you need to have a requirement management plan to give you clarity, to everyone. What does it actually mean? So let me say, now that we are building the e-commerce site, you are going to tell these are the different topics. You can actually detail it the way you want to. And let me tell you, a good BA is somebody who can detail out and be very specific with information. A BA who's giving very high level information to you is not a good BA. because they do not have confidence and clarity, and hence they cannot percolate something down. Confidence and clarity actually means if you can explain a complex concept to your grandmother, and if your grandmother is able to understand it in a simple language, then it means you have understood it completely. Okay, so it has to be as simple as that. So let's quickly start building this. So now you know you're dealing with 25-30 different people. You've created the functional topics, you created different departments. This is what you know. Then what you're asking for is point of contact. Whom am I going to talk to for collecting the requirement? Even before this, I'm going to say, let's say this, then I'll say time. When am I going to meet them? Whom am I going to collect requirements from? How much time will I have with them? And over a period of time, as a smart BA, you'll also figure out location. There will be experiences sometimes where you are sitting in one meeting for the entire requirement session because they have blocked it. And sometimes in organizations, you cannot block a big meeting room for 6 weeks at a stretch. There could be some, some other, important meetings happening within the organization. So the location of the meeting room keeps changing. Hence the need for managing certain basic logistics like these. All right. So this is what you will start with. Okay. So this is high level. You see how I will go ahead and build this part. How to color this? Okay. I'm beginning to beautify this. Okay. So that people like to see, and trust me, reading documents is the most painful process. If you're asking somebody else to review it, it's a pain. You love your documentation, don't expect everybody to love it. So make it as easy to consume as possible. So make it as visual as possible so that information can be consumed in 5 minutes rather than spending 45 minutes to understand the same information. So that's a skill a BA can bring to the table, where you are making information consumable. Okay, so here we're talking about functional topics. So now I would like to understand what aspects of search are you going to cover? Okay, so I want help from all of you. What should we cover here? So let's say I want to cover for search for product category. Okay, example. What else will I cover? I will cover search configurations. Okay, some of it I'm just making it up just so you get how much of detailing you can give to your requirement gathering information or plan. Okay, I'm saying I'm going to discuss with this particular department how to search for product categories. I'm going to have that discussion. Then I'm going to talk about what are the kind of search configurations they're looking for. Search-based reports. Okay, so this is what I want to search. This is what I want to discuss with them. Build this, then I will say whose category management point of contact will be Rob. Now I'm putting these names so that it looks complete, but when you build it, you will not know who is the point of contact. How do you get this information? Firstly, you will create, or you will fill up all the things which really you know. For example, sometimes you may not even know this detail, which is fine to start with. You may even set up a meeting with. So what happens when you're working on a project? There's one point of contact. Either there is a project manager at the other end, at the user end, or it could be a PMO who is coordinating, or it could be a senior manager who is just doing some coordination for the this particular project. So the point of contact will help you build this better. you feel incomplete, you should set up a meeting with them for an hour and discuss this and finish this whole, table. So if this information is not available with you, you can always ask them or leave it as TBD. You know the departments, you don't know the departments. So you do TBD. So wherever you feel you need more information, you can set up meeting prior to actually visiting. So all this effort you're putting to even before you go to that location to collect requirements. Then you're building point of contact. So here this is filled, this is definitely filled by the user side or the customer side. Time is what you mentioned. Now let's say they start very early in the US. Okay. So I'm saying setting. So usually each of the requirement gathering session that you do for a particular topic should be about 60 minutes to 90 minutes, not more than that for a particular topic. You can, and also the recommendation is if you can do not more than 4 to 5 hours of requirement gathering. You don't necessarily have to sit the entire day gathering requirements. There are also situations where first half of the day is dedicated to collecting requirements. Second half of the day, you can actually spend, documentation, building process maps, etc. So this is a good practice so that you don't burden yourself, trying to spend the whole day and you feel exhausted, you can't get anything done after that. So in the waterfall method, what we used to do, there were really bad practices that we followed where we collected requirements or, for the entire day. Even the customers are enthusiastic in the first week. So they are also sitting with you the whole day, starting from 8 a.m. to maybe about 4:30, 5 p.m. in the evening. And after that, you're also out of energy. You can't do anything. And sometimes you have meetings with your IT team. You're not able to make it. Even if you make it, it's not very effective. So there were also situations where we did only first half requirements, second half, we kind of did documentation. That was a little effective. So you can decide for yourself how you want to set this, but don't be ambitious. Don't try to spend too much time collecting requirements. Break it down as modular as possible. So this is how you're going to, I'm not going to spend too much time because already 10:24. I want to give time to other things. So here location could be meeting hall 204. Who can help you with all this? And sometimes if the users or customers are proactive, they will help you fill up all this. Okay, so let's say I work for some Japanese clients. They are very proactive. They will help you fill up all this, highly detailed. They want it to the T. And there are also companies I've worked with where they don't really want to help you out with all this. So you have to make the effort to set up the meeting and collect this information. Okay, so this is very important. It helps you build this out. Okay, so what you're actually telling is hourly, hour-wise, day-wise, which topic I will cover, with whom, etc. And then what happens, you also should have what is called comment section, where here you will capture. Also, interestingly, what happens is when you're doing the requirement gathering, you will also not 100% collect the requirements. Sometimes you may do only 70% justice to the requirement gathering session. So you may not be able to complete it in time. Hence, you need to have few days of buffer. So let's say I'm doing a 4-week of requirement gathering. Better to have 3 to 4 days of buffer. That is, sometimes there could be absenteeism. They may not make it. Sometimes you're not able to complete the requirement in time for silly reasons, like you could not find a marker, you could not get a power socket, or the projector is not working. Some of the time is wasted, or the team member was late to the meeting. So all these kind of contingencies can happen. So don't have a tightly packed schedule. Have some loose fit, have some amount of buffer so that you can make adjustments like this. Okay, so you may not be able to complete, and there are also action items. You think you will collect all the requirements, but sometimes the customer themselves are not clear about giving you the requirements. They may struggle with it. They will come to the meeting and say, hey, maybe you should have asked these questions early on. I would have come prepared for this requirement gathering session. And it's sometimes a good practice that If the customer is proactive, highly focused, you can send out a list of questions on each of these topics early on so that the users can come prepared for these topics. These are certain pitfalls, like you think you will go there and people are really interested in giving you requirements or wanting to participate. They are going to come prepared. It's not going to happen. A lot of them just come there just for the first time trying to figure out, hey, what is this IT team trying to build? What are they, so just coming with a lot of excitement on the spot, not coming prepared. So it's a waste of your time. So to ensure that you make complete use of your time, all these things are required. Build in detail what are the topics you want to cover, what are the detailing in that topic, what exactly you want to cover, which department, who is the point of contact, get this particular time, location. Comments is where you will mention Rob. Okay, so let's say you missed out collecting configuration information. Rob suggested you have to set up a configuration. So what does this mean? Let's say you circulate this sheet with anybody, your project manager, yourself. After 1 week or 2 weeks, or even after 3 weeks, you will remember this information. Trust me, the amount of information that is flowing to you, you have to capture it real time. You cannot say, I forgot something, etc. That looks really bad on a BA. Hence, any commitment made, any communication that is coming your way needs to be captured like this. Okay. Also, it is also always better if you have another person pairing with you, a technical architect or a support BA or a junior BA accompanying you. Okay. Action items could be that Jen will share version 1.2 of search catalog information. Certain information which they already have will add a lot of value to how to build your requirements. Okay, it has a lot of intelligence, so that will help you build better requirements. So therefore, there could be some action items, there could be some comments, and the point of contact. So this way you got to completely build. When you start building it, you will see that you may end up building something like this. Okay, you said morning 8:30 to 10:30. Firstly, you start off with the project kickoff. Always there is a project kickoff. You have all the stakeholders attending the meeting. There could be 25, 30 or 40 people, not 40, maybe 25, 30 important people, the head of departments, along with some senior managers making it to the meeting because they want to understand what features will they get access to on the new application. Okay. So therefore, a project kickoff will actually talk about what is the requirement plan. What is the plan for the next 2 weeks if you're working in an agile project, or what is the plan for the next 6 weeks if you're working in a requirements plan. I'm just giving you these numbers, but it could vary. Okay. The requirement gathering in agile is usually shorter and it happens very frequently. So this is how you build a requirement gathering plan. You will see that this amount of detailing is there. You will also have to add in breaks. You cannot continuously keep doing it. You'll have to think about tea breaks. You'll have to think about lunch breaks. All these are very basic things you may think, but very important because you are arranging or creating an event management kind of a situation here. People have to be ready. People have to be, you have to book slots. So this is done by the coordinator on their side, but you and along with your project manager will be working all these things out because you're front ending. You cannot say I'm a BA, I will not do all this. You may have to do it. So you take the leadership role there. So the stakeholders, then your additional information, meeting status, what is pending? Is it complete or pending? For example, you've completed, have a status which says complete. There are action items, you take it, etc. Okay. And then you will see you can also, one more funny thing is that you need to give them additional requests. They say, what do you need? That's a very generic question and you will not know what to ask for. You also need to say that you need to ask for stationery. You need to ask for whiteboard. Sometimes whiteboards are not available. How do you do it? White sheets. You need something to scribble on. Okay, you need a microphone. You need a projector. You need all these different stationaries. You need to call it out. See, as simple as water bottles and candies also, because it's all very mechanical. PMO has hundreds of things to do. You are one of the stakeholders. Think about it like that. Don't expect you'll get a grand welcome for requirement gathering, etc. So you got to plan it out. They will help you out. They will be courteous, but the devil is in the details. You got to carry out all this properly so that you're able to achieve everything in time. Because let's say it's 6 weeks and you make it 8 weeks, it's not going to make look good. So these things are very important. So stationery is very important. And also you need to send out minutes of meeting on a regular basis daily. You need to send out minutes of meeting, what you did, what you were able to achieve, etc. You should be able to send out minutes of meeting, right? So I think you got a good understanding of requirements management plan. Okay, so you can make it as detailed as you want to, but this is how it flows. You need to know hour wise, you need to know topic, you need to. I hope you're able to see my screen, right? I hope it's not like the last time where, yeah.
We can, thank you.
So you can use a simple Excel, you can use a PowerPoint, whatever is convenient. You'll also get a lot of help from stakeholders from the other side, which is the customer side. Very important. You need to send out minutes of meeting on a daily basis, which gives confidence that something is happening. So it's like, you've gone into a battle and your team is actually sitting in some meeting room and trying to figure out, hey, how's it going? Is the requirement session going on fine? What is the status, etc. So giving minutes of meeting is very, very important. Now, quickly, I will share some tips on how to do user interviews. Okay, so there are different ways to collect requirements. So if you're a really senior person, what you will do is you will, am I sharing? Yes. So if you're a really senior and a seasoned BA, you can do facilitation workshops. Facilitation workshops are where you're bringing different teams together in one big room. You're asking them to kind of, build from scratch kind of applications. You will say, hey, okay, so what are the current problems you're facing? Okay, very broad questions. You're going to open-ended questions you're going to throw at them. Every department will, then what you can do, you can give them post-it notes. The post-it notes, they will start filling out all the problems that they have. Then you give them time, you give them about 10-15 minutes to do that. Then you ask all of them to come and post that on the wall or on the big whiteboard. And then you spend 10 minutes trying to understand what's going on. Then you will build separate categories, or you will put these different problems into different buckets. Sometimes a finance manager may be talking the same thing as a purchase manager, or a sales manager may be talking the same thing as a finance manager. So you actually, and only the wordings may be different. So you kind of go through the effort of putting all this together into different buckets, broad buckets. So you understand these are the broad requirements or high level information that you want to see on the website. This is what you need to solve for. So it's a big orchestration. That's a senior role. The most effective way to collect requirements for entry level BAs or BAs, I mean, there's no age gap there or experience requirement. User interviews are very good because it's a lot more focused. It's shorter, and a good user interview will have anywhere between 1 or 2 people to about 5 people in the room giving you requirements. Too many people, too much chaos, too much of negation, too much of this thing happening. So again, you need to ensure that you get the right people for giving the requirements, the right people with right knowledge that should come through. What are the elements of a user interview? Okay, what works, what doesn't work. So user interview, you should have about 1 to 5 people, not more than that. Ask open-ended questions. Don't ask questions like, are you happy with the current application? Yes or no? No. Are you happy with the way the process works? Order process works? No, I'm not happy. This is not the way it works. So you got to ask questions like, what is the current challenges that you're facing? That's an open-ended question. What are the challenges in your order management process? Can you explain your order management process? So these are certain open-ended questions where you collect more information from the user. Another good way or best practice is to record audio. Most of the users or companies will allow you to record the requirement gathering session, provided you confirm to them that this is going to be confidential and not shared with anybody else. What this actually does is it helps you revisit all the conversations you had. And sometimes there are some important conversations you would have missed out. So it helps you go back and recollect that information. So having audio recordings of the interview sessions helps. You know, using an audio recorder on your laptop is more than enough. Just click it on and then record the whole session. And sometimes it's strenuous. You don't have to do it for all the sessions. Only important sessions you can do the recording. You should inform them beforehand that you will record it. Also, like you said, you have a support BA that also helps. In case you miss out or you need to quickly take notes, it helps. Secondly, like I told you, it is good if you can send out a questionnaire beforehand to the users saying, these are the list of questions for which I will be looking for answers. So can you come prepared to the user interview session? So that makes it a lot more efficient discussion when you get into the meeting room. So creating a questionnaire and sending it out to the user via the coordinator will actually be very effective. What are the questions you will ask? You will ask process, and you will understand the as-is process. Explain the current order management process. As they're explaining the order management process, some of the teams do not have process maps or any sort of visual representation of the current processes. Here, it becomes very important for you to quickly stand up, go to the whiteboard and start creating the flow chart or the flow on the go. This way, you are real-time confirming to what they are actually saying. Imagine I listen to a user for 45 minutes and then I capture something at the end of the day, and when I send it to them, there will be a lot of back and forth because what you understood is not what they were actually wanting to convey to you. Hence, if you can visually represent information quickly on the go, on the spot, it helps correct a lot of that information straight away. So creating process maps helps big time if you're trying to understand processes. Suppose the user already has process maps in place, it is always good to project them and start your discussions using that process map so that what they're saying matches with what is already existing in the process maps. So this way, both of you come to a sort of conclusion very quickly. Otherwise, it's like two people in a dark room trying to figure out something, right? So this is a more efficient way of trying to visually represent information to get easy confirmation on a lot of requirements. Then you want to get into areas like, what are the top 3 challenges, or what are the top challenges you're facing in your current process? Because there is a pain, you are here to solve that pain. You're here to solve that problem. Okay, it could be performance issues, it could be data related issues, it could be lack of required features, or it could be something else. So they could talk about low performance. This is usually the case. Higher cycle times, not having reporting, lack of reporting ability in the current applications could be some of the major pain areas. Okay, so this kind of opens up their thinking. They're able to think broad, they're able to think clearly rather than making it an interrogation. Always good to ask open-ended questions. Open-ended questions are those questions where the responses are not usually yes or no. Okay, those kind of things. What are you looking for in the new application is, you are asking, like, once you have sufficient information on the functionality, feature, and how it has to work, you start with something broad, understanding the process. Then you come to understanding the problems in each of the steps within that process. Then you're trying to ask, hey, what are the kind of features? Usually you will not ask these questions, but if it's a mature team, it's a mature customer who already has experience implementing a lot of applications like these, they will definitely call out that we are looking for the search ability. We need this kind of, they will not get into details. They will probably explain it in business terms. How you convert business lingo into IT lingo is an art, is something that's left to you. You do that. And sometimes customers will also ask, can you give me some examples from or some best practices from your other customers? Who are the other competitors for whom you have built? Can you explain? Or how does it work in the industry? What are the best practices? So that's where, if you have experience, that comes into play. But these are the kind of open-ended questions that you need to ask. There is a start. When you start, you're always starting 5-10 minutes is your, introduction, etc. You exchange business cards. Always carry business cards with you. It looks very formal. So when you're traveling, you can raise a request within your organization to issue you business cards. Carry those business cards. It always helps in exchanging that. Once you have that quick intro, a quick informal talk about weather, traffic, whatever, just to break the ice. When you're settling in the first 5-10 minutes, then you're straight away getting into the as is process. Then you are also discussing what is the problems. So this kind of gives you an idea on how to build a to-be process. Then you get into features, saying, hey, okay, can you show current application? They may even walk you through the current application. Or there is no application, then it's open to imagination. Or let's say you are a product company having a product, Salesforce CRM or a SAP. There are standard workflows. So you walk them through those standard workflows and then ask them, do you need any changes here? Or they will themselves point out that here, this particular place, we need configuration, or here we need a particular field called XYZ. This is how the conversation happens. Because if they're existing products and you're walking them through, also collecting requirements. So you see, you will not create process maps when there's an existing application that you want to show. What you're actually merely doing is show the application and ask what is the variation. This is called as gap analysis. But if you're building something from scratch and you have to depend on process maps, you have to depend on old information, that's how you got to do it, what I explained earlier. So then how does a questionnaire actually look? When you actually send out a questionnaire beforehand, if you want to do it, you should ask process-based questions. Can you explain the existing order management process? Who are the different stakeholders? Can you walk me through the current application? Okay. User journey. What is the average day look like for you? What are you trying to achieve? If you're actually interviewing a customer service agent, you want to understand what does their average day look like? What are your top targets or goals that you're looking for the day? Because then that helps you build features which will help them achieve those goals. If your features are not going to help them finish more orders or process more orders, your application is not serving the purpose. And understand what is important, what does success mean to them. Then you also look at technical challenges. So you may have a technical lead or someone along with you doing that work. Else you work with them to figure out what are the page loading time, browser versions that you're going to support, access-based, database questions, etc. Then you will also capture risk and dependency-based information as you go through that this thing. Sometimes you'll say, hey, a part of it is on the cloud, part of the data is on-prem. We have acquired new companies. The data models are different. Simply struggling to make this happen, etc. So these kind of challenges exist. I hope you got a fair understanding of how you can build your questionnaire. These are broad ideas so that when I build a questionnaire, does it actually encompass process, user, technical related questions so that you get complete information. So process maps is something like this. It could be step by step, something very crude, right? You can create it. Just created this introduction, requirement discussion, action items, and then you have minutes of meeting. So send out minutes of meeting at the end of the day to all the stakeholders. Sometimes you may also add attachments or links saying that this is what we covered, this we could not cover. These are the action items, etc. Every day. If you don't do it on a daily basis and you try it after 1 week, you would have forgotten a lot of things. Trust me, when you forget things, it shows really bad on the BA. You also want to understand what are the jobs that they do, what are the pains that the user has. You also may try to understand what is the root cause while they're explaining, so you kind of get an understanding of this, so that when you talk to your technical architects or solution architects, you can explain what is that the customer is actually facing an issue with. That helps. Okay, so this is another important thing. You need to build a RACI chart. This is at the very beginning when you are there. It helps you understand. What I do is I mentally slot users in different buckets. I need to do this because if I'm interacting with 30 to 40 different people, I need to know who are the people who are experts, who I need to go to for expert information, who I need to ignore, or who I just need to acknowledge. So R stands for responsible, A stands for accountable, C stands for consulted, I for informed. Responsible are people who are responsible for positive outcomes or negative outcomes of the project. Accountable are your department leaders or project sponsors who are accountable for the final outcome. Consulting are SMEs whom you will reach out to or who give you the best of requirements. Informed are people who are happy to get the attention, but they don't really add much value. They are just mere audience, but you cannot irritate them or disappoint them. So you have to keep them informed. So you need to mentally slot them into different brackets. So you're able to manage your stakeholders very well. So this is stakeholder management for you. You can apply this in anywhere. You can apply this in your real life. You know, whom to give importance, whom not to, whom to ignore, these kind of things. So minutes of meeting, I think we spoke about it. This was an assignment. So this is what I wanted to cover as part of the requirement management plan and user interviews. Okay, so now I think I will request you to ask me any sort of questions you may have. Questions, anyone? Can you share yesterday's recording also? Yes, I will share. I'm trying to put that on YouTube. Let me check if Praveen is here. Praveen will join at 11 o'clock. Okay, so let me also share more information what we did yesterday. So you see, I'll show you some of the other examples. So we built this requirement management plan. Minutes of the meeting I explained. So how does a minutes of meeting look like? I'm sure you're aware of it. Just trying to say that again. Date. You need to mention the date. You need to mention what were the topics that you covered. Who were the stakeholders? Minutes will actually talk about what are the different topics, what happened, etc. Then you got to call out the action items. This is very, very important. On a daily basis, you will call out the action items. Also, if possible, mention estimated end date by when they need to provide you that information. So this is a good practice to send out minutes of meeting. I think we did a RACI. Assumptions and risks also you can capture separately. That's also good practice to do this particular thing. So we're 10:50. Okay. What we'll do is we will pause for like 10 minutes, take a break, come back at 11 o'clock. Praveen will be on the call. We will do quick agile work so that you get a complete understanding of what are certain interesting things about agile. Okay, so
I had a question, Prashant.
yeah.
So I wanted to understand how the role of a business analyst is different from what a product manager or a product owner does as part of the requirement gathering.
So business analysts are usually delivery focused. That is, they are gathering requirements are very inward focused. That their objective is to understand the requirements clearly from the customer and then ship high quality software. That's pretty much it. But for a product manager, they have to manage the success of the product. So a product manager are outward looking. They need to understand what kind of features that need to get into the product. Where is the product headed? Okay, so that's an outward looking approach. So a product manager in a way can also become the giver of requirements. A business analyst is a taker of requirements. So they become very inward focused. Product manager, again, they could be both inward and outward focused. If you talk to IIBA or business analysis, they will say BA can also become CEO. BAs can do everything. So BAs can also do outward looking, but BAs are mostly inward looking and delivery focused. How many user stories I need to build? When do I do the grooming? So they want to follow the ceremonies. But a product manager may not necessarily do all this. A product manager may manage or maybe outward looking and give requirements to a product owner or a business analyst in the team. Makes sense?
Okay, so yeah, it does. Just one follow-up question. So how does it work in a team where we have a product manager as well as a business analyst? I mean, I want to understand the gap between what is the line that divides their responsibility.
A product manager is someone who there may be an existing product. So what they're looking at is tracking metrics. So for example, they released a new feature. They want to track how well the feature is doing. So they're focused on metrics, etc. Now let's say they've launched something really quick. They're getting feedback that the feature is not doing well or has some bugs. That information is passed on to the team. Then sometimes the business analyst creates, requirements or tries to interact with the product manager, etc. So product manager is always on the lookout of how do I improve the product, how do I grow the product. So sort of you can look at product manager also playing the sales and marketing kind of a role, trying to sell and pitch the product wherever possible. And again, this is all in varying degrees, depends on domain, depends on industry, depends on companies, how they are using. For example, if you go to a Swiggy or a Uber companies, the product managers are highly data focused. Okay, they're looking at what is the average, ticket size per trip, how many people try to book and drop off, how many people were able to successfully book. So this kind of data they try to study and try to improve the experience. Whereas a business analyst is looking, how do I build this feature the next 1 month? How do I ensure I do the demo to the customer or to the product manager or whoever? So they're heavily focused on how do I collect requirement, how do I build it? Product manager also does that. See, again, it depends on team structure. If the team can afford a product manager and a BA, nothing like it. Sometimes PM has to do also write user stories. Fair enough. So then there will be sales people or marketing people or business people doing part of what the product manager should do as an outward looking effort.
Okay, makes sense.
Yeah, if you go to Google or some Facebook, right, pure plays product companies. So these are people where product just does that, writes very high level, maybe writes epics. That's it. So they may not even be a BA. They will be a developer who is smart, who will understand, who will build something, what the product manager says. If you see most of the smaller product teams, and they have like 5 to 6 people, and sometimes even developers try to understand what the user is asking for. They get into user requirement sessions. That can happen.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to pause the recording if no more questions. Please join back. I think you have 3 minutes. Well, anyway, pause it for now.
Try to make it little bit interactive to know in terms of what is your background in understanding the agile and the agile concepts, and then we can slowly switch towards the main agenda for BA. So, so please feel free to raise your hands, or in the chat window you can let me know if you have any questions or experience in terms of the agile. So that helps me to start with at least a good understanding from our group.
I have a question, Praveen, to start with. So,
Yeah,
how is
sure.
business analysis, role different from waterfall to agile, right? So, how should somebody
Okay.
prep themselves? Because nowadays in India, waterfall is less, more of agile. You see,
Hmm.
so how can the people prep themselves to work in the agile environment?
Okay. So thanks, Prashant, for that question. So I would probably start off saying that um, there are two different, I would say, situations. Okay, in a traditional world, we used to validate most of the thing and then get into the execution mode. I'm just trying to put it in a plain terms so that it's easy for everyone here to understand. So before we implement anything or before we jump on to execution, so people wanted to validate it multiple times with different groups of stakeholders. It could be from the development team, from the business team, and also from users. So where you used to have multiple phase gates saying that, okay, this is a design phase, this is an analysis phase, and then a construction phase and implementation followed by support. So every phase had some kind of a handshake, and then moving forward. In an agile way, we try to bring everything in a one single iteration. When I say iteration, you would be including all the people from design, from uh, systems engineering, and from construction, from the business, from the user community. So all of these people sit together, discuss on it, at least come up with some prototype draft version, and then this prototype would be developed in a quick span of time, and it would be showed probably in a 2 weeks of time or 3 weeks of time, where the user gets to see the first version and says, okay, I'm fine with it, or I would suggest you few changes to it, then go ahead. So that way we are trying to get a faster response from the user, and user is also able to get a quick understanding about the concept to realization. Concept to cash, we say here. Concept to realization, I would put it. Okay, so this is just a quick, I would say, clarification for the question you have asked, Prashant. Does that clarify your query?
Yep, yep. Thanks, Praveen.
Okay, thank you. So maybe I will just, what I will do is, since we have a good amount of 15 minutes, I will spend on giving you a basic understanding how an agile era is in compared to a traditional world. When I say traditional, it is like waterfall, or we have other frameworks that we have used in line to waterfall, so we can relate with that. And after we just have at least a high level understanding, then we can switch towards how agile has brought changes and what is usually been happening in the real time world in the organizations, because there is a lot of hype on agile, and people think that they are doing agile, but they are mostly different from what is an ideal scenario that is expected. So so that's where we will start, and then we will switch into the BA, and we will have 15 minutes of time for Q&A on the BA. Hope this agenda is good.
Yeah, this works, Praveen.
Okay, okay, I'm going to share my screen here, and let me know once you're able to see my screen. Is my screen visible?
Not yet.
No.
How about now?
Nope.
No?
No.
Let
No.
me, okay, let me check once again. I think it should work now.
Yep. Now it's visible.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm just trying to use one of the content that I have used in few seminars or conferences as well. So here you see a small tree which has a foundation called a career marketplace. So we usually try to give an basic understanding what a career can be in an agile frame of world. Okay, where people think, okay, agile is different, I have to learn many things, and it's a totally different world. So here I'm just trying to give you a glimpse in an agile era. So you have few new roles because you try to bring in some kind of a proximity to work closely with business. So you end up trying to create few roles for the convenience of giving that transparency, faster communication, and a quick response, everything. So if you see in Agile, we have a few roles like unit manager, Agile developer, guild leader, tribe manager. This is specific to the organization also. Some roles are not usually been, I would say, standard in most of the organizations. A few of them are standard, few of them are organization specific. So I will only give you the reference of the standard ones. So if you see in Agile, you have a development team. So the development team is again a cross-functional team. I'll explain what do you mean by cross-functional team, and it is also referred as an agile developer. And you have a BA, you have a product owner, and you have a scrum master who is also referred as an agile master. I will explain you why it is coined as an agile master, in most popularly known as a scrum master. And you have an architect who could be a domain architect, a system architect, or a functional architect, and an ops team, operations team. While RT is again a super, I would say, role of an agile master, where you have multiple agile masters or a scrum master, where we try to have one integrated scrum master called as an RTE. So RTE stands for release train engineer. Okay, so we will not spend much on this slide, but this is just for your understanding. And usually in agile, what is the difference is in our previous traditional world, we used to have a development team, we used to have a testing, a support, DBA, and many other teams like BA team. So knowing that a team, again, you're creating multiple walls within this group, saying that, okay, I've done my work, I'm a developer, and I'm given it to tester, so I don't want to take any responsibility. Now it is tester's headache whether he wants to test it properly or is trying to get it passed. Or even if BA or functional expert develops a design and he gives it to the development team, he thinks it's his role is done there. So there are minor virtual walls created when you have a demarcation as a specific team within the group of that scope of work. Okay, so hence what Agile has done is to eliminate all these things. They wanted to create one team with a combination of all these people, so that the barriers within this each of the mindsets of the people, saying that, okay, I don't want to touch your area of space. Okay, you complete, then you give me, then only I look into it. And similarly, a tester may say that until unless everything is completed, I will not look into it. That is not my expectations. So instead of that, we have to understand that while we are working for one particular team, our main contribution is what a team needs, what our business needs, or what our end user needs. All of us are contributing to one vision, that is a shared vision. So hence, whether it is a developer or a BA or a tester, whoever it is, they are now onboarded into one team called as a cross-functional team. Okay. So far clear what agile team is going to be constitute of? Any questions? Any questions? Am I audible still? Still?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
you
you
are
are. It
audible.
is good.
Okay. Okay.
Yep.
So in this slide, you can see what a developer's career can look like. It could be starting from a beginner role, software engineer, specialist software engineer. It goes on to lead and finally a distinguished software engineer or a head of a software engineering practices. So similarly, we'll have again a career path which usually comes into this corporate world for a BA as well. Okay. And the development team does what it does, it understands having a good basic knowledge about what an agile is expected in a team level, how we end up doing a DevOps. I don't know, this is again going to be little different topic, we will not touch on it. DevOps is again integration of development and an operation. Maybe in the end when we have a Q&A we can talk on that as well, develop DevOps fundamental. And how many of you know behavior driven development being probably aspiring into the BA community? Does anyone have experienced this? Feel free to say no as well, because it's again, we are all here for learning. I'm also looking forward to learn something from you people from your own experiences. Even it is something you don't know, it is okay to acknowledge. Okay. Okay, I will quickly switch into the I'm an Agile Master. Agile Master, okay. So in Agile, there are many frameworks again. Okay, you have a Scrum framework, you have a Kanban, you have Lean practices and all. So predominantly, a Scrum Master is coming who implements a Scrum framework. But again, today Scrum is not the only framework that we use for any development for software. We also use a hybrid model called Kanban or a Lean. So when you're using other hybrid models, just limiting the role to a Scrum framework is not going to give you a right reference. Hence, to make it broader, so the Scrum Master has been most referred as coined as Agile Master, because it can be extended to other frameworks like Kanban and Lean beyond Scrum. So that's the reason you see this as a Agile Master role. And if you see what role of an Agile Master is, he will be part of the team. He is expected to set up an environment which is more open, which is trying to understand what the team is going through, the pain points, and try to be empathy with it. Unlike what we have an authoritative role in our waterfall, saying that okay, a lead comes in, understands the scope of work, assigns the scope of work, and then tries to monitor and reviews and also validates. And there is some kind of a authority over the team saying that this is how you should do it. If this is not done, I think I have to probably escalate it. I think that's not the way that Agile recommends, because every team member has his or her role to contribute in the team. So hence it is mostly looked at as a equal contribution. While Agile Master also is one of the team member, he tries to, you know, work without influencing the authority, which means that he'll try to understand what the team is going through, how team needs support. If there are any impediments or any blockers, he would be the one who will go and try to eliminate or clear out, so that team will be able to focus on it. Okay, that is a layer that he creates. And he also works with a product owner. We will understand what a product owner role, and an application manager, so, and a Agile Master. So so this is what you see. And have you experienced at least anything on Scrum framework? Do you know what exactly is Scrum?
Um, yeah, Praveen, a little bit.
Okay. How about others in this call?
Yeah, Praveen, some idea.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Thanks for acknowledging it.
Praveen, I have a
So
question here,
what?
right?
Yeah, please go ahead.
So thinking about practices, right now I'm thinking as a PO or as a
Mhm,
analyst in an agile environment, what are some of the
mhm,
mistakes that generally they make, like BA or PO? What are the general mistakes
mhm.
that you would have identified, which the
Okay.
PO can correct?
Okay. So yes. So what usually happens is PO usually thinks that like when you have someone as a BA, okay, so what happens is BA again has a little bit of common responsibilities compared to PO, product owner. But again, there is a larger scope for a product owner compared to BA. So what happens, a product owner, the word title product owner itself symbols that this particular role is having a larger expectation on owning the product and envisioning the product and trying to evolve the product based on the user persona. When I say user persona, thinking user in their shoes or putting himself or herself in the user shoes, they have to visualize what the user is looking forward, and then prioritize working with the user what is important for them in the current state, and then slowly getting that understanding cascaded to the team and get the deliverables in time as per the priority agreed. So in this process, a product owner sometimes tries to juggle between priorities, okay, saying that if he doesn't do a proper groundwork in defining his priorities or her priorities on what is required, so what will happen, there is a frequent shift in terms of what is to be done. So today, I don't know how many of us have in the call, so can I just get a fair count, how many of us there in this call today?
About 25 people. About 25 people.
Oh, thank you. So assume that we are having, let's make it as a two teams, equal distributed, maybe around 12 and 13. Okay. Ideally, we say in Scrum, we will look into smaller size, not more than 10, and we will be having a dedicated focus from this group to work on it. So today, if I'm coming and saying that, hey guys, we have got a clarity, we need to work on developing this feature and we need to give this by next 2 weeks, and everyone are really motivated to come and understand the feature and they start working on it, and suddenly I come back after 3 days saying that, hey you guys, I just got to know that from the user there is a small change and we need to accommodate it. Maybe as a first request you may say, okay, let's try and do that, but someone in this 10-member team or in another team, they will think that, okay, I have to go back and redo some of my development or some of my design or some of my test scenarios also. So again, as you adapted to this request in a quick note that you had to spend half day to rework and readjust to the new features or new scope in the feature. After, again, I'll come back another 3 4 days later saying that, hey guys, I just got to know that there is some change from the user community. So we need to probably revalidate the feature and then do it. So what has happened is we lost almost 5 days of our development and we are again going back to discover what is happening. So in this course of situations, people end up trying to get lost in terms of how should they go back and start doing from scratch or re-implementing the feature. So it takes a lot of time on the rework. So this is the usual tendency that a product owner gets into, like coming frequent changes to the team, which probably shifts the focus of the team or demotivates the team, and also adds probably to the more technical debit or the more defects. And in the BA also, so what happens in the BA role also, there are some expectations that, okay, they will be contributing on the design and the feature. So there will be a possibility that they will be working closely with the product owner, though they don't directly interact with the business. So what will happen is, if you don't understand what a product owner is trying to ask, or you have to be very clear, going by the framework, what is going to be required, and then get it validated before everything is freezed. They need to check it out and then give it to the team. If you see that there is a definition of done here, so does anyone know what exactly a definition of done means here?
So as per the team, whatever conditions they have set to mark it as done, to call a work as a deployable code. So
Is
whatever
it
the
as
team
per
has
the
set.
whatever the
Yeah,
team has said? So
yeah,
and
whatever the
okay, so okay,
Yes.
at end of the sorry, go ahead.
Also, when all the acceptance criteria are met, then it is marked as definition of done.
True. So who defines the acceptance criteria here?
It is product owner.
So product owner alone can define an acceptance criteria.
Along with the scrum master.
Okay. So there is a small deviation here. Scrum Master will not get into the deliverables here. He is going to ensure that the framework, the process that is being defined as per Scrum is followed. But the team, the Scrum team and the product owner together sits and understands, okay, if assume Prashant is playing a product owner role, he gives me a feature. I am one of the member in the Scrum team. I will try to understand, is this feature in a deliverable state, which means that can I work on it? So I will look in terms of an invest mode. Okay. So is it for me clear in terms of whether the information is clear? And do you think this feature is non-negotiable? Let's assume if I have to develop all these things, is it something that I can deprioritize, or it has to be going? And then what is the value by delivering this feature? And E is for estimate. If I can't break down my scope of work and I can't estimate, there is some uncertainty. In that uncertainty, if you start working on it, if you cannot go back and complete it, then your deliverable is not in a state. And the last is testable. Okay. So what does it mean? If you, whenever you're looking for any acceptance criteria, you can use this as a thumb rule, like the invest one that I have said. So you need to ask product owner. So I might ask Prashant here, Prashant, what exactly this feature is going to contribute, and how in the entire functionality this feature is going to be, whether it is going to contribute in an upstream or a downstream dependencies. That is one. And do you think uh, by adding this particular screen, what will happen? So what value it is generating here? So when I ask all these questions and then I come into the defining at least a high level technical or development scope, then I will break it down into smaller pieces of coding. So where I'll think, okay, I can estimate it, and finally I'll see, okay, this is having all the clarity. So do you agree, Prashant, if I deliver this screen or this feature in this way, is it okay for you? Then if he's also fine with it, that's our acceptance criteria or definition of done. And after 2 weeks, when I present this particular feature to Prashant, he should be able to see and visualize as per the understanding we had 2 weeks before. So is the screen and the feature has come out in the same way? And if he's saying no, this is missing, then I will revisit towards an acceptance criteria saying that can you look into this, because this is what our understanding. Are we probably differing from our understanding? Was there any change? Then he may say, yeah, maybe I think during that time, my assumption was that this screen is going to capture all these things, but I think there was a minor miss. So I would like you to add this to it. It is still okay, because even product owner is human, bound to make errors. So we should be able to accommodate. So in the end, it is not that what a development team or a product owner wants, it's what an end user wants. If you are delivering something to an end user and he is not using it, what is the value that it is really generating if someone is not using it, right? So our main focus is how we are going to keep our customer happy, how our customer is satisfied in the end. That is the usual main objective to be looked into it.
One question from one of the participants says that
Yes.
acceptance criteria is met means DOD achieved. Then what's the significance of another added layer of DOD? Can't we use only acceptance criteria as an exit criteria?
No, see, acceptance criteria could be on a feature level. Okay. So now as a development team, we started working on it. We know the feature wise. Today, I don't know the development dependencies. I'm assuming that in the entire 25 people, we have a team A and team B. Team A is working on this feature, but does this feature have some dependencies with the team B, which they have developed some component in the previous one? So how are we going to check? In the middle of the development, suddenly we discover my particular object is locked. Until team B releases it, I can't work on it. So this is something that you would have discovered in the middle of your development. So it is a good practice that what you learned your mistakes, what are the best practices. You can document it as a checklist saying that, okay, can I look into all these things? Also could be part of it as your definition of done, which you have to create as one of your checklist. Mostly definition of done is having a larger reflection of your acceptance criteria. But again, from a product owner, this is the definition of done. But from a team standpoint, if you have any kind of challenges encountered in the past in any of these deliverables, then you can also revisit that and put it some kind of a reference list, and that can be used. Is that
Makes
clear?
sense, Praveen.
Okay.
This again. I want to check with AK. AK, are you clear? Yeah, I think so. So I think this
It
very
is interchange. See, usually it is interchange definition of done. There is similarly definition of ready also. Okay. So definition of ready means before someone gives the design to the team, they should check whether all the required information is available so that I can give it to the team for a quick reference to understand what is being asked here. So, and the definition of done is something that we all agree. If we are trying to meet this as our destination point, then let's put it as an acceptance. So the acceptance criteria or definition of done is interchanged or used in that. But again, you can further expand the scope in the definition of done as well, saying that, okay, how do we add more additional layers of checkpoints?
okay. So again, right? So there could be scope creep, etc. Right? So are there any best practices to manage that? Sudden changes in.
Obviously, true. So let's say as an agile master, so most of the time the role agile master or the scrum master is abused in the corporate world because they think this person is just a person who ends up delegating work and then just start moving around and noticing what is happening. No, usually the role, I mean, if you have an effective scrum master or an agile master, the team will end up trying to improve their deliverable maturity from time to time. How it is, if I'm an agile master, what I will try to understand is I have a 9-member team. What I'll think is, okay, I will look in terms of what is the ideal working capex for my team. We will be ending up in many meetings. We will be ending up in some organization meetings which are we cannot avoid, and there are few distractions so that we do some trainings. So what I will try to do is I will try to arrive at some at least an actual capex that is going to be spent from this team in this 2 weeks time. If I'm thinking that we have an 8 hours of working window and we spend 15 minutes in a daily stand up and we have a sprint planning, probably assuming a 2 hours in the beginning of the week, and going by a sprint closure and a review another 2 weeks, and all this contributes to 5 hours or 5.5 hours of my overall time in the 2 weeks. And provided we do have some additional meetings or some administrative tasks or any kind of a training that we do, it takes at least another 1 hour or so. Overall, it is coming to 7.5 hours, approximately 8 hours. So 8 hours means out of 10 working days in 2 weeks, we are losing one working day. And if I am not really taking that into consideration, getting the smaller slippages is overlooked, so I'm overcommitting and I'm making my team also overcommitting, right? So which means I'm trying to stretch my team and I'm trying to force them to work or slog, and at some point of time, people will drain out. So if there is a good agile master, scrum master, what he or she will try to do is understand what is the actual capacity of the team and give that visibility to the team member, saying that, hey, you have 9 working days as against 10 working days, and if you're taking 9 into whatever the time frame, 7 as productive hours, okay, so how much it comes to 63. So you have a 63 hours of time in this sprint. So, or we consider it as a story points also. So when you are trying to take any kind of a story or requirement, you need to be cautious that you are trying to complete within the 63 hours. If something is overstretching, then you need to let us know so that we can communicate to the product owner saying that we can't take it. So overall, the team capacity is only to take 5 stories in this sprint. And because product owner is influencing, says that, hey, I want this also priority. Business is pushing me hard. I want this to be done. If Agile Master is not really courageous enough to challenge him, then he will say, he come back to the team, hey, this is high priority. It is pressure from top. We have to take it. If not, we will be measured against this in our performance or many other things. So I understand it is an additional work, but you go ahead and stretch and you do it. Later we will see what we can do it. But if you're setting that trend, and then slowly what will happen is that becomes a norm. So tomorrow product owner will, instead of requesting, you will come and say, I want this story to be done. Please add it to the backlog or add it to the sprint backlog. So we don't have any kind of say on it. So an agile master has to live up, probably challenge a product owner saying that this is our capacity. If you want me to take this, then can you help us understand which one I need to remove it from the scope, so that I can make a commitment that by end of this sprint, all this 5 would be delivered without any surprises. So that is a line of conversation which an agile master has to work through, so that he is trying to balance the expectations between a product owner and the team. And similarly, if a team is trying to probably take due advantage and they wanted to say, you know what, I'm working on this story, I can't take anything. So at least an agile master has to understand what is this complexity in this story, why it would be taking more time. And if it is something it is not really been visualized or estimated, then he should be able to help this individual to get the right estimation and see if team is able to take it up and deliver it. Okay, so it's again a bridge between these two particular roles, where the team and the product owner have an agile master, ensures that we end up taking the right balance of scope of work.
So those are really good.
And also there are a lot of metrics which we use it, a burn down chart, and you have some estimation techniques or prioritization techniques. So because as a team we don't know what we are trying to commit, is it the right one or is it something over committed or under committed? How does we get to know? So agile master has to understand the strengths and weakness of the team members, and then see that, okay, if my team is constantly committing but failing to deliver, which means that there is some problem in the estimation, because they are not able to estimate appropriately and they are over committing. And finally, in the end, they'll come back and say, I'm not able to deliver for whatever reasons. They found a new scope, they found, or they thought this particular activity will be completed in quick time, but it is not happening. So that is where you need to understand how a team is operating, how can a team improve from one sprint to other, so that a team is really matured to that. And at some point of time, an agile master becomes little bit, I would say, redundant, because team is autonomous. Team knows what to do. Just going to the backlog, looking in terms of what is the scope, can someone take it up? But they have to be aware about it, what is their scope of capacity and how much they can commit towards it. Okay. And also, if any manager comes in between, says that, hey guys, I know you're working on this sprint scope, but I want you to complete this particular quick work, because we have an org-wide commitment. So can you please start working on it? In that case, Agile Master has to come back and let the manager know. So if this is a smaller work, we will try to take it. If this is going to be a huge effort, I'm afraid that we will lose one story being delivered in this sprint. Are you okay with this? If that's the case, then can we have a call with the product owner saying that this is something which we discovered now from organization. So we wanted to probably deprioritize one story and we will deliver only 4 out of 5. And we will ensure that this one will take in the next sprint. So with the manager, with the product owner, if he is trying to bridge that conversation and get it committed, still there is no kind of a, I would say, concern for the team here. Is that okay?
Yep.
Okay, I'll just quickly, because I think we focus much on Agile Master, I'll try to move into usually what an Agile Master is looking in, making a trusting environment. The team has to be believing that what is being committed is good, and at the same time we need to encourage the team to be taking up more motivational work so that it becomes as a good sign of delivery, and ensure that we have good boundaries in terms of we should know what is expected, and we should not be crossing that. Let's assume going for favors and taking more work and then slogging and trying to say that this is not my scope of work, I took it and all. So it's better to have a clear transparency, communication, and trust. Okay. So what exactly an agile master role can go through? There are multiple roles where he or she could enroll for a little bit of a project related trainings also, which beyond the scrum they can be able to use it. And for transformations, because agile is again you're transforming from traditional ways of working towards a new ways of working. So there are many trainings which you get in terms of being towards an agile enthusiastic, and agile framework also is taken to the next level with an enterprise level used with a framework like SAFe. SAFe is called Scaled Agile Framework, which is called Agile at Scale also, which this will be there. And trying to implement Agile through many ways, like ways of working. W is WOW here is ways of working. And you have Agile leadership roles also. Okay. And I'll quickly move to the BA role here. Okay. Can someone help me understand what is the time? So how much time we do still have?
So it's
11:40. I think
11:40.
I'll take.
Yeah, 11:40.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So before we get into the BA role, I just wanted to give you one real-time situation. Okay. And I think then let's get into it. So most of us have experienced the situations being in demonetization world. Yes, right? 4 years back, I believe
Yeah,
4 or 5 years back,
yeah.
we had a demonetization. Okay. And during that time, we have seen few applications or apps in our mobiles to download where an ATM is loaded with money, and so that we don't need to go and spend in queues for a long time, just to go and check if some ATMs have quick money and we can go and access it and get that. Have any one of us experienced these situations?
Yeah, Praveen, I think.
Yeah, Praveen. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So what was the driving factor here is someone has visualized that there is a good need in the industry or in the environment today, that suddenly there is a scarcity in knowing the information where there is a cash available in an ATM. So instead of trying to make it from word of mouth, what they've done is, can we develop an app and put that information so that it helps for many people and it becomes a business model also. So knowing that, someone has come up with an app, but one observation that I've noticed is this app was configured only to certain regions in the city. Let's assume if we take Bangalore as a scenario, I see Bangalore East data is given in this app, or Bangalore East and West, but not overall Bangalore. Okay. So any quick thoughts why this was done, not for overall Bangalore? It could be right or wrong, just a guess.
You repeat that, Praveen. Sorry, missed that.
So what I'm asking is, in that app, I was only seeing that the data of the ATM available with cash was only for certain regions in the city. Like the data was showing only for Bangalore East or a Bangalore West or a Bangalore North or the South, but not to the entire Bangalore at one single go.
Maybe because it's a densely populated and more walk-ins kind of footfalls. Is that some one of?
Okay. Okay. So my assumption, I might be wrong here as well, but what exactly I was thinking is to develop this app to get into the data that needs in, and finally make it real-time usage for the people. There's a lot of effort that goes in to develop from each particular region and get the data I would say real-time to float. Okay, so when you have developed this app in a short span of time, knowing that this was there for actively 8 weeks or 10 weeks, okay, so developing an app could have taken 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and where there is a most usage of this app was during the peak time, that 1 month or 6 weeks time frame. So if they are trying to improve the app by extending it to all the regions and then finally launching it after 10 weeks, where the situation has become normal, now there is not much rush in the ATMs and cash is available at regular dispense. So do you think this app would have been helpful for many people and they would have downloaded to use it?
Yeah, I guess so.
So usually what happens is the need of the R is we need to give the information in that particular time frame when the user community wants. And if we are missing that timeline and we are passing that phase, then this information may not be really helpful to them to use. So what I have seen is the app's most need was during that 6 weeks to 10 weeks of time frame. Okay. So assuming during that August to mid of September, where the time frame was being used. And if you have developed the app in a quick span of 10 days and we are launching the app, so people have really found this app useful and able to capture on it, and whatever they are able to get the benefit both ways. App is being used and the app generators has developed some kind of a ROI, return on investment. At the same time, users have got benefited. But if we are developing this app from almost 2 months, 3 months, and then launching to the market with full-fledged data with all the Bangalore information, then what would have happened is the situation is no more demanding for this app. So here, what exactly is that knowing the immediate need in the market, how we capitalize on it, how do we cater to that market dynamic needs, and then provide that real-time functions. So
Functions.
that is what which really helps us to be sustainable in the market. Does that clarify on this note what exactly we are trying to achieve?
Yep, yep. If you are not delivering it in the right time when the
Yes.
no problem is there,
So
then
what happens is,
yeah, I
go
have
ahead,
a
Prashant.
question,
Sorry.
Praveen. So see, how do you classify between a good product owner and a bad, not a, I mean, a bad product owner? Let's say bad is not the word, but how do you assess that? Hey, this product owner is good. So what are the things that you look for? Right, you would have seen a lot of POs
Mm.
in
See,
your.
again, as I said, right? So understanding the role and the responsibilities, what is looked at in terms of it, a product owner has to build a clear product. So keeping in mind how a product is shaping up in the entire big picture. If you have a story, you know that okay, this is my requirement one or my feature one towards my feature 10. How this all features connected towards delivering the big picture that you can relate with, then you will be able to design the sequence of the flow, saying that okay, this feature will connect to that feature and then probably it goes on, and finally he will visualize the picture. If that image is instilled in the minds of the team, then you would be able to also analyze and see the possible validations. Okay, if I'm delivering this feature, so maybe my previous feature has some kind of a dependencies. So I need to probably inline to that, I need to develop this feature. So where we try to use like a story mapping. Okay. So today, if I have a series of activities that I need to do, I will try to prioritize and then I will take it saying that from a sequence 1 to sequence 10, this is the steps that we need to follow. Similarly, like how do you define your scope of product being visualized and developed is something a product owner is going to predict and give that right understanding to the team. If this is being done, I think the role of a product owner is really being effective, and is onboarding the team to understand from his lens to see how a product is look to be shaped up. So that is one. And the other qualities of a product owner is trying to understand and make team also realize the value and the importance of the work that they are trying to do, how that will impact towards the end user. Okay. So if you are not able to visualize the end user in your deliverables, then it becomes a challenging scenario. Okay, that is the point two. And three, being empathy with the team. So saying that, okay, I understand that you're going through this. So let me see what I can do. Can I go and trade off with the business and come back saying that, okay, this is how we can do it, because these things may not help us. So this could be one more. So these are the, I would say, good traits or behaviors of a product owner. So as against someone who is very, I would say, authoritative, dynamic, saying that I don't care a damn for you, I want this to be done. But there is some kind of a black box for you. You don't know, I'm delivering this feature, but what happens after that, I don't know. He comes back and later says it, no, no, this is not happening. I want it to be changed. Then how you would be able to visualize why he's asking this change, how this change will result in the overall end functions of the product. So these are the things that we end up seeing difference in terms of a typical product owner towards an ideal product owner. Does that make sense?
Yep. Yep, Praveen. Thank you.
So again, coming to the BA role, okay. So from moving from traditional to the agile world, I just gave you few references that any situation that is dynamically being responded, where we see in an agile world, it can be achieved. If you're going in traditional way, it becomes a challenging, because any product that we used to develop in waterfall used to see the light of the day only after 6 to 8 months. Okay, and now in the current state of I would say era of the corporate world, or the dynamic digital era, so I see that things are changing from 1 month to 2 month. If you are defining something 8 months before and trying to wait and see how it shapes up, then I think we will end up using only limited features overall from the function that you have developed. If you have spent 8 months and you have delivered 12 features, and out of 12 only 3 is being used by your end user or your business, then the time that has invested in the overall 12 features, only 3 is being used. If you measure the value, only 3 is being considered. So the amount of efforts, time, and money spent on the additional 9 features is of no use. So instead of taking that approach, I will spend only my time which is important. Okay, I'm sitting with the business, I'm sitting with the business like product owner is sitting with business. There is a BA who is representing with the product owner to understand. There is a cross functional team who is trying to immediately work on it in 2 weeks to give some prototype, and if that is fine, they will deliver it. If not, they will do a quick change and give it. So I'm committing that I will spend every 2 iterations, I'll give you some meaningful outcome. Okay, and then I'll deliver only 4 features or 5 features to you in the next 6 months. But again, all these 5 are being used. So it's 100% utilization of your time, effort, and whatever the revenue that has been spent in building this. So where do you see the, I mean, the ROI here? In the waterfall model or in the agile mode? Any
So
Yeah,
any feedbacks?
definitely
definitely.
the agile one.
Yeah, so that is where Agile has become more popular, saying that, okay, when I am able to get a quick response, when I'm able to spend less money and getting only the features that I want, then why I need to go and spend on a big bang releases, right? So that is where I think coming more value towards the money that is being spent, or any kind of time being spent, that is where Agile is trying to be picked up over waterfall. I wouldn't say waterfall is bad or it is negative here. It is like agile gives you more advantage over waterfall. So that is where people are trending towards agile than probably leaning towards a waterfall. Okay. So in a BA world, what happens is, if you see traditionally, BA is just trying to understand, define an analysis on a document design and then giving it. So usually a BA role is critical here. How it happens is in the development team, BA used to only. I'm sorry, I think I'm getting an echo here. I just paused. Can we go on mute so that if you have any questions, you can stop me?
I'll put them on mute.
Okay, thank you. So I'll just try.
I cannot hear you anything anymore.
So Praveen, you can unmute yourself. I muted all the guests. Sorry, yeah. So you'll have to unmute yourself.
Okay, am I audible now?
Yeah, Praveen.
Yes.
Thank you. So what I'm just trying to mention here is a business analyst is currently from an IT who understands and represents from the IT side of the expectations or the challenges. Well, similarly, you need to have someone from business side to represent the business view. So here, if you have a product owner also identified from an IT, so it becomes that you don't discover what is really required from a business standpoint. You only say that this is what we are facing through, this is the challenging scenarios an IT is going for development. But how we will able to relate with business scenarios or challenges, it is going to be important. So hence someone who is representing business in the role of a product owner would be an ideal one, because this person is going to come back with the business expectations, trying to give that understanding towards an IT team. So hence a BA role is going to be critical here from an IT standpoint, how a technological dependencies from cascading impacts on development should be able to envision and give it. And there are many ways of improvising. In a BA role, you have a BDD, which is called a behavior driven development. So today you have multiple personas, imagining as a end user, imagining as a developer, imagining as a tester. So here behavior driven development gives you an opportunity, like there are three roles or three amigos called. When you are writing a story, think yourself that as an end user, this is what I'm looking forward, provided if you give me this particular deliverable, this is how I would want it to use it. So giving any kind of a technical specification, sorry, functional specification in that scenario, it helps the development team to visualize what exactly it is happening. And then once this functional requirement written in this way of behavior driven development, it also gives you an opportunity to visualize from the business, from IT, and you would be able to accomplish the full vision of what exactly the expectations are. So hence there are many I would say frameworks like design thinking we use, or we use BDD or any other things to improvise the role of a BA in the corporate world. How do we use it and how do we bring value towards the contribution on this role? And what the career path of a BA looks like here is moving from a business analyst, he can become a product owner, at least trying to represent business, and a product manager and a business owner. So there are many such roles which you can think in terms of how your career can shape up next few years in the corporate world. I will stop here in the interest of time. I'm sorry I had taken a little bit more time than I promised. But again, I would be interested to hear any questions, and I'll be glad to answer them.
Hey Praveen, one question here. So
Yeah.
I'm more seeing JDs where even for a Scrum Master role, they're looking for people who can write user stories. So that's against the agile practice, correct? But in case if you have to play that role, how do you do justice to both?
So yeah, I think it's a good point. So usually Agile gives you some basic fundamentals, which is important, which we should not really play around with it. But unfortunately, in the corporate world where they go through the utilization mechanism. They say, okay, I have 5 members in the team. Can someone put an additional helping hand? So if Agile Master can do that. But the problem here is if Agile Master is playing, writing a user story, what happens is tomorrow if he is trying to, trade off with the product owner, he will be influenced in terms of saying that, look, this story, I have to work on it. I am probably not able to deliver it for whatever reasons. So he may not be able to represent through the right means of expectation, because he is also one of the team member to contribute and deliver. So there is some kind of a bias in terms of where this person's decisions may get influenced with the additional stretch role that he is being currently asked for. So in an ideal way, we will not recommend, but if it is only one of the scenario, yes, he can put his helping hand. Does that clarify?
Yeah, Praveen.
But again, if an agile master is really mature enough, he or she knows her responsibilities, then they should probably limit that. Okay, my role is as of today, I am playing a team member developing this user story. So my role is only as a developer I'm talking today. But tomorrow, if I'm representing a daily stand-up or I'm talking with a product owner, this is in the capacity of an agile master. So if he or she is able to bring that hat when they are representing that role, then it is still good to be managed. It all depends on the maturity this role is being played.
Yeah, Praveen.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I am okay to spend a few more minutes since we had very less time for Q&A. If you are okay, I'm fine for it. And also, please do give me a feedback how you think this session was helpful for you or not helpful for you. Even if it is totally crap, I don't mind. But at least it is important that I make more meaningful presentation in my next interactions. So any further questions you have?
Folks, anyone, any questions in the agile space?
I can give you something at
Yeah,
the end.
Abhishek.
So I have already few slides. The product owner, what a product owner is usually looking. A proxy product owner is also being created for the convenience. And product manager, what usually the trainings and interactions, strategic business owner, and Scrum cheat sheet. This might be a ready reckoner for you. What a Scrum team is expected to do, what a product owner is expected to do, what a quickly a Scrum master is expected to do, what is the product backlog, what is the sprint backlog, what is the burn down chart, what is the release backlog. All these things is you can use it as a quick reference and quick artifacts about what we do in the Scrum.
Yeah, so this will be excellent source of information for all the attendees here. That will be really helpful. So AK has a question, right? So he was talking
Okay.
about,
Yes.
let's assume the organization which has published this JD is struggling to solve that problem as its current team is not writing user stories. So they are in search of a change agent who can coach, train, mentor people to write or define effective user stories. Do you think it is not something master is supposed to do as part of his coaching, training, mentoring part?
Okay, good
Is it
question
not
here,
the role
AK.
of a scrum master to ensure that better user stories are written, whether it is he?
Yes. So as I mentioned in the beginning, a Scrum Master role becomes effective when he's looking at the strengths and weakness of the team. If his team is struggling on any specific functions, it could be on writing a story or understanding a story or defining a definition of done or an acceptance criteria, anything. So this particular Scrum Master has to spend time to make his team realize how an effective user story could be written, what is required in understanding this user story, and also how a user story could be estimated and any other best practices that has been used in that organization or in the team in the past, which helps them to take advantage. So this is something if they're nurturing this team, I think in the end, the team should be able to get the benefit from the Scrum Master. Immediately, we can't say see the change in the next sprint. We may expect at least 2 to 3 sprints to get this change to be reflected. And over a period of time, your team should be able to do that without any support. Okay. So yes, again, it's all how much of experience your Scrum Master comes in as a coach. If you're expecting too much from a Scrum Master as a coach, then it's going to be a mismatch in the role expectations. You are taking someone who is new or a junior in Scrum Master and expecting him to drive everything, then it is going to be not the right expectations. So you need to have a right person in the right role. So that is the reason when we form a team, the very first thing that we try to do is uh, giving some awareness on the roles and responsibilities. And we don't try to go and say, hey, you know what, this is your role, this is my role. No, we try to create a brainstorming session. We try to put up a list of activities in each role. I will put 10 to 12 activities in the BA role, and 10 to 12 activities in developer role, 10 to 12 activities in product owner role, 10 to 12 activities in whoever is playing the role of a tester. Now I will ask all of us, the 10 people, to come and sit and say what out of this 10 makes sense for a product owner to pick it up for the scope of work that we assume. And if you're taking up the top 6, so let's put this 6 in the product owner's bucket. And will the product owner says that, yeah, I agree with you, this should be good for me, yes, fine. Similarly, we are trying to define the same for a developer role, for a tester, for a BA, and everyone. So what happens is, no one person is trying to define the role here. As a team, as a group of 10 people, we have defined a common roles between a team for each individual or each role. Now there should not be any disconnect or deviation from what is expected. So that is where we will complete the roles and responsibilities workshop, so that after this workshop everyone knows what is being expected from each of them. Does it make sense?
Yeah, I think the response is, yeah, it's good.
Okay.
Anyone?
Any other questions?
Okay, so then let's conclude the session for today. Thanks, Praveen. Thank you so much for patiently, explaining the concepts. Be happy if we can get a copy of that presentation. It was really nice, very informative, lot of information concisely captured. So
Okay.
we got a good perspective of Agile. I'm sure you can connect with, Praveen on LinkedIn. You have any questions, that will be really nice. Yeah, Nidin, I'll actually put it up, so you should be able to get it from some public this thing. So that's the aim. Let me also quickly share what we are planning next class. Next week we will be looking at we will look at user story writing. We will look at user story writing. And since we did the user story part, I'm going to do storytelling in the next session. So it will be how do you tell good stories? How do you tell meaningful stories to anyone and any audience, right? So a business analyst has to tell good data telling stories, should be able to tell stories which connect with the audience, etc. So we'll do that. And then we will also look at writing user stories. So I'll focus on user stories in the first half of the section. Second half of the section, I will cover storytelling. So that's the agenda for next Saturday. Then I will also talk about how to write better use cases. Then we will get into BRD and the other requirement documentation on Sunday. Saturday, it's going to be user stories, storytelling. The Sunday, we will talk about use cases and writing the traditional documentation. We will look at Moscow method. We will look at how to prioritize requirements. How do you actually capture those requirements? What I'm going to teach you is quickly, if you look at any of the software applications, how can you quickly create good requirements? How can you concisely capture information in a very short period of time is what I'm going to teach you. A lot of best practices that we will share. Okay. thanks for joining in. Hope to see you next weekend. So let's connect then. In the meantime, I'll try to get these videos up on YouTube so that it's publicly available. So please do share, etc. I will also show that in the next class where you can find it, etc. So stay tuned. Thank you.
Thank you, Prashant. Thanks, everyone. I really